Jason Momoa built a world that seemed larger than life. A $40 million mansion carved into the rolling hills of California, movie contracts valued at twice that amount, and a public image that made him appear untouchable. Yet, by 2023, cracks began to show. Rumors circulated among neighbors that Momoa no longer lived in the grand estate. Instead, he had retreated into a luxury Sprinter van parked nearby, outfitted with a shower, kitchen, and surfboard rack. At first glance, the van suggested a carefree, adventurous lifestyle. Behind the surface, however, it was a deliberate, self-imposed exile. As court filings surfaced and private therapy notes leaked, a far darker portrait emerged. Beneath the broad shoulders and heroic film roles was a man unraveling, tormented by the very force and persona that had once propelled him to fame. When investigators and contractors eventually stepped inside the mansion, they discovered empty rooms, peculiar relics, uncashed checks intended for charitable causes, and walls scrawled with messages. The reality within was far removed from Hollywood headlines. Jason Momoa, the global icon known as Aquaman, had transformed his home into a monument of guilt, confusion, and introspection. This account is not one of superstition or scandal. It is a story about the collision of myth and self, the consequences that emerge when a man becomes larger than life and loses control over the legend he created. This is the story of what lay hidden in Jason Momoa's mansion and why he never returned. Jason Momoa was born in August 1979, long before fame ever touched his life. From the beginning, his existence was divided. His father, Joseph, a painter from Hawaii, had grown up surrounded by salt-swept beaches, rusted rooftops, and the unending sound of crashing waves. His mother, Con, came from a small town in Iowa, a place defined by its long winters and familiar, unchanging faces. Their love was a bridge between two worlds that rarely met. When Jason was only 6 months old, his parents separated. Joseph returned to Hawaii, while Con remained in Iowa, taking her son thousands of miles away from the ocean that seemed to course through his blood. This separation between land and sea, belonging and displacement, would define Jason's life and character. Growing up in Norwalk, Iowa, Jason's island features and darker skin made him stand out in a predominantly white school, making him a target for ridicule. Teasing escalated to exclusion. He was shoved into lockers, mocked for his long hair, worn sandals, and soft-spoken voice. Attempts to fit in through soccer or skateboarding failed repeatedly. Summers with his father in Hawaii offered no true refuge. Locals called him Heil, a stranger. Even among his own people, he was an outsider. In Iowa, he was considered too Hawaiian. In Hawaii, not Hawaiian enough. This constant push and pull hardened him, forging a compulsion to prove himself. By the time he graduated high school at 16, the youngest in his class, humor and self-assurance had become protective shields. Beneath the surface, however, burned a longing to escape, to be recognized, and to reconnect with the ocean that had haunted him since childhood. Marine biology, the study of life beneath the waves, became a distant dream, a vision of freedom that offered a world where he could finally breathe. At 19, Jason left Iowa with little more than a suitcase of worn shirts and an enduring yearning for the ocean. He enrolled at the University of Hawaii to study marine biology, anticipating a life among coral reefs rather than cameras and spotlights. Yet fate intervened. In 1998, while working part-time at a surf shop, he caught the attention of a fashion designer who noticed his height, poise, and quiet intensity. Within minutes, she suggested he try modeling. Though he initially laughed, curiosity overcame doubt. Within months, he was thrust into the world of fashion, runway shows, and cameras. By 1999, he had been named Hawaii's Model of the Year and walked for Louis Vuitton. Much of his early story, he later admitted, was embellished. Desperate to be noticed, he had claimed experience he had not earned. That audacity became a lifelong lesson. Charisma and confidence could outweigh credentials, a pattern that would follow him for years. That same year presented another turning point. Open auditions for Baywatch Hawaii, where over 1,300 hopefuls awaited. Jason endured a 7-hour line, exhausted and inexperienced. Standing before the casting team, he had no formal resume, only his story and natural presence. He landed the part, transforming almost overnight from a small-town youth to an internationally recognized television lifeguard. Despite the rapid ascent, fame felt alien. He was uncomfortable with attention, embarrassed by the superficial image imposed upon him. Every mention of Baywatch made him feel smaller. When the show ended in 2001, doors closed. Jason struggled to maintain his career, taking odd jobs, and appearing in the poorly received made-for-TV sequel Baywatch, Hawaiian Wedding. By 23, he was broke, overlooked, and painfully aware that image-driven success rarely endures. At 24, Jason lived in Los Angeles with no stable income or clear path forward. Casting directors saw only a pretty face. Opportunities were scarce. He waited tables, slept on friends' couches, and watched his savings vanish. Jobs in construction, nightclub security, and other odd positions became essential for survival. By 2003, the allure of Hollywood had nearly disappeared. Jason contemplated returning to school to finish his degree in wildlife biology. A small breakthrough came with a short-lived television drama called North Shore. Though it offered a steady paycheck, the show was expensive to produce and failed to gain viewers, ending after one season. Financial stress mounted. Unpaid mortgages, repossessed cars, and the sale of personal belongings to afford food. Solace arrived in solitary hikes in Topanga Canyon. In 2007, a near drowning while surfing off Maui became a pivotal moment. His leash snapped, leaving him stranded almost a mile from shore. The incident was a humbling reminder that some forces, like the ocean, cannot be controlled. In response, he began abstaining from alcohol, meditating, and committing to rigorous daily workouts. He embraced the AR-7 training system, 7 sets of 7 reps with 7 seconds of rest, a physical regimen that reflected a need to regain control, not for performance, but for personal mastery. By 25, nearly forgotten by Hollywood, Jason received a call that would alter his career trajectory. An audition for Stargate Atlantis. He was to play Ronan Dex, a silent, brooding warrior. Jason arrived at the audition with long dreadlocks and a muscular frame, projecting an aura of survivalist intensity. Without formal martial arts training, he dedicated himself to swordplay, grappling, and close combat drills under stunt coordinator James Bamford. Injuries were frequent, but he refused to complain or rely on stunt doubles, believing authenticity required full commitment. Crew members grew uneasy. Co-star Joe Flanagan described him as brilliantly unhinged. Jason clashed with writers over character authenticity, at one point threatening to leave when dialogue felt inconsistent. Despite late nights, heavy drinking, and on-set tensions, Stargate Atlantis became a turning point. He was no longer simply a model or surfer. He had become a fighter. Yet the same anger and pain that fueled his on-screen performance began to seep into his personal life. By 2009, Jason had built a reputation within small circles as strong, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Yet widespread recognition remained elusive. With no agent willing to champion him, he returned to his mother's house in Iowa, reflecting on whether his prime had already passed. Then arrived a casting call that would redefine his career, the role of Khal Drogo in HBO's Game of Thrones. The character spoke little but commanded armies. At the audition, Jason performed a traditional Maui haka, a raw and visceral war dance that stunned the casting team. He won the role and brought unrelenting intensity to the screen, performing his own stunts despite injuries, merging rage, dominance, and primal energy. Off-screen, his intensity occasionally caused controversy, such as a 2011 Comic-Con joke that resurfaced in 2017 during the #MeToo movement, leading to a public apology. Privately, Jason wrestled with a blurred line between performance and self. Drogo's death on screen left him emotionally shattered, feeling he had buried a version of himself. Fame returned, yet the very role that propelled him to prominence also confined him. After Game of Thrones, Jason faced nearly 2 years of professional uncertainty. With a wife, Lisa Bonet, and 2 children, financial strain was acute. He borrowed money from family, maxed out credit cards, and endured periods of near starvation. During this period, he lived in a van, parking it near his mansion to maintain a sense of connection while embracing freedom. The van contained surfboards, notebooks, photographs, and a solitary mattress. Later inspections of the mansion revealed rooms filled with Hawaiian artifacts, walls covered in messages about water, identity, and silence, uncashed charity checks, untouched scripts, and meditation corners. The home seemed abandoned but was, in reality, a snapshot of a man in the midst of self-reconstruction, grappling with identity under the unrelenting gaze of public expectation. Turning inward, Jason redirected energy into philanthropy and environmental advocacy. He donated millions to protect native Hawaiian land, became a UN advocate for ocean preservation, and founded Mananalu, a company replacing plastic bottles with aluminum alternatives. Publicly, he projected a more deliberate, measured persona. In 2024, he returned to television with Chief of War, a series exploring Hawaiian unification and his heritage, taking on directing, writing, and partial funding. Even then, disputes over budgets, filming locations, and authenticity underscored that Hollywood chaos had never fully released its grip on him. Today, Jason Momoa balances between his former fame and a quieter life of reflection. He alternates between van life and visits to his mansion, where the walls remain empty, furniture is covered, and the air carries the weight of memory. The discoveries within the mansion were not disturbing for the objects themselves, but for what they revealed. Even heroes can quietly drown, not in water, but in their own reflection. Each stage of Jason's life, from the bullied Iowa child to Stargate warrior, from Drogo's wrath to Aquaman's might, contributed to a living archive of identity, struggle, and myth. His choices, the mansion, the van, and the paths he walked are all evidence of a man perpetually rediscovering himself, negotiating the pressures of legend, fame, and the self.